few people realize how much of the planet depends on groundwater.
And if that's contaminated, then we've got a huge problem.
What is it? Is it alive?
Are they in the water? Are they in the sediments?
How extensive is it in the ecosystem?
You have essentially set a time bomb. The effects are permanent.
The only question is, will we be able to stem the tide?
It's like something out of science fiction. Unsettling transformations are sweeping across the planet. And clue by clue, investigators are assembling a new picture of Earth. They suspect we've entered a time of faster global change than any human being has ever witnessed. But we can rise to the challenge, alter the course. It's up to all of us to confront these strange days on planet Earth. What's happening in the Yucatan isn't an isolated case. Nearly a fourth of the Earth's fresh water flows through similar cave networks, many in tourist hotspots like Bermuda, Florida, Spain, Australia. As some investigators continue to explore these concealed systems, others are focusing on water that's in plain sight, streams, rivers, and estuaries. This very visible water is also getting daily doses of trouble from us. A surprising range of everyday actions, everything from planting a tulip to driving a golf ball, can have unexpected consequences. Like the mysterious infection now plaguing a kind of American idol, except this idol has scales and gills. You might call it the fish that launched 1,000 outboards.
Initially, you know, this was a few isolated cases, but then fishermen were calling me every day with a story about a fish they'd caught. What did I just catch? You know, what's wrong with the fish? And do I have to worry about it?
Wolfgang Vogelbein is a pathologist. He specializes in the diseases that plague fish, but he'd never seen a wild species with anything quite like this. And this wasn't just any fish. This disease had broken out in one of Chesapeake Bay's signature species, the Atlantic striped bass.
It's December in the mid-Atlantic, and striped bass are the target. The biggest pair of striper could be worth $50,000. Get ready for the battle of the Chesapeake Bay.
Big cash prizes are a sign of the big love many Americans have for what locals here call rockfish. It's a love affair that goes back to colonial times when the Pilgrims made this fish the subject of America's first conservation law. In summer, when stripers migrate up the coast, aficionados track them every inch of the way.
There are thousands upon thousands of anglers that await striped bass with, it's hard to even describe the amount of passion and the amount of buzz on the internet. There's fish that certainly grow much larger, fish that fight harder, fish that leap out of the water, but there is a majesty, there's something magical about striped bass.
Mike Laptu is so hooked on them, he's become a striper paparazzo, trying to snag a cover shot.
When it's prime time like this, all I'm thinking about is when is the next right tide, with the right wind conditions, where the visibility will open up, where I'll get my crack at seeing hopefully that 70 or 80 pound to go in front of the lens.
The sick ones, he'd just as soon avoid.
When they have red lesions on them, well, that makes you think twice. Not only about eating the fish, but just plain handling the fish.
Hoping to reassure worried striper lovers everywhere, Vogelbein and his colleagues set out to determine just how many striped bass are getting sick. The team examines thousands of fish. And what they find is hardly comforting. Over half the fish they look at show some sign of infection, and the sickest are likely to die.
Okay, this is a fairly heavily affected fish. You see right here, very large one here, and a couple of smaller ones over here. It's likely that the disease is also internal. Well, we'll open it up and we'll take a look. You see all the big grayish nodules. When you see a fish that's affected like that, you know, it brings it home to you.
And makes you ask, what's destroying these fish? The task of screening suspects falls to microbiologist Martha Rhodes. Her tests reveal the disease is caused by bacteria. Bacteria from a large and often nasty family of germs.
They're called mycobacteria, and the disease is called mycobacteriosis. Some of them cause some major human diseases like tuberculosis. There's been a long history of this disease in aquaculture situations, and what they've seen is that once a stock is infected, those fish are going to die.
But pinning down the exact species proves harder than expected. By chance, in the clutter on Rhodes's lab bench, a few culture dishes get shoved to the back and are forgotten.
I don't know why, but I did forget about them. And then one day, maybe 3 months later, I went back, and in cleaning the counter, I rediscovered these plates, and there were colonies growing on them. It was a wonderful surprise.
The slow-growing mycobacteria infecting striped bass were a species new to science. Knowing little about this new germ, the team had to confront a terrible prospect. Could it kill enough stripers to put the entire stock at risk? Fisheries biologist John Honig runs computer models that track the Chesapeake striped bass population. To everyone's dismay, he sees a spike in deaths. The Chesapeake striper could be in serious trouble.
Of course, nobody knows the underlying cause of this increasing natural mortality. Our hypothesis is it may be this bacterial disease. How are we going to get at that question?
What if we were to tag a bunch of fish and examine them at the time we release them? We'd have some that we tag that look clean and some that have, skin lesions. And if you only get back 2% of the fish with lesions and 10% the clean fish, then we know there's a problem.
Left side is clean, right side is clean. There is some ulceration here along the fin. Our goal over 3 years is to tag 15 to 20,000 fish. When some fisherman catches that fish, he can call us, we'll go pick that whole fish up, and then we'll be able to compare that fish with the old photographs, of maybe a year ago when we first released that fish, and we can begin to say something about the progression of the disease.
Anglers are rooting for Vogelbein while shedding a tear for the sickly striper. The rest of us probably don't fret that much about fish, but that might be about to change. For a mute animal, the striped bass is saying pretty clearly that something is wrong in the bay.
Perhaps striped bass could be looked at as an indicator, almost like the canary in the coal mine.
Chesapeake Bay is the largest of America's 130 estuaries, and the third largest in the world. As with most estuaries, myriad species call it home. It's also the nursery for many more that spend their adult lives in the ocean. But this bay, like many estuaries around the world, is changing. One troubling shift is a summertime drop in deepwater oxygen. Investigators have identified the culprit. Phytoplankton blooms are population explosions of microscopic aquatic plants and algae. Blooms are happening more often in Chesapeake Bay. When this stuff dies, it falls to the bottom and decomposes.
And during that process, oxygen is used. And you develop in the deeper waters these areas where there is no oxygen.
Fish need oxygen just like other animals. So stripers that summer in the bay are being forced to change some deeply ingrained habits.
These fish don't like the warm water temperatures that they encounter here during the summer months. So they sort of hunker down in the deeper, cooler portions of the bay.
Only now, these refuges from summer's heat are off limits. There's no longer enough oxygen down there.
So during the warmest, most stressful times of the year, they're being forced into shallower, more stressful, warmer waters.
Increased stress reduces a body's resistance to disease. It's true for us, it's true for fish. So why is all this happening? Why are phytoplankton blooms becoming more common? Investigators know that discharges from factories and wastewater treatment plants can act like fertilizer and fuel a bloom. But clean water laws have reduced the volume of chemicals coming from many of these big sources. So why are the blooms getting worse? Well, maybe I should ask you, how green does your garden grow? The use of chemical fertilizers in the Chesapeake watershed has soared in recent decades as the number of people living and working here has tripled. From just about everywhere, chemicals called nutrients are being washed unnoticed into streams and rivers and carried to the bay. The result, here and elsewhere, is something called dead zones. Places where species that can't run away fast enough die for lack of oxygen. Over 300 persistent or seasonal dead zones have formed worldwide, and the number is growing.
So in a sense, we are the enemy, you know.
Except we can't really afford to be the enemy. That just means we all lose, and so does the bay. Of course, we need homes and jobs. We need productive farms. And we need healthy estuaries. So how can we have it all? Throughout the region, solutions to the nutrient runoff problem are being tested. Like incentives for farmers to change the layout of their fields so less runoff gets into streams. Like restoring wetlands, which act as filters. Like installing rooftop gardens and vegetation to reduce runoff from urban areas. Creative new solutions abound.
And I think we've developed now over the last few years some potentially viable approaches to address this question.
And if enough people and communities adopt them, this bay and these fish stand a chance of a healthier future.